This is really for the professional who consistently does great work. You're not chasing the spotlight. You're in it for that quiet satisfaction of a job done right, for the pride you take in your competence. So in the next few minutes, let's explore why all that hard work doesn't always get the visibility it deserves, and more importantly, what we can do about it. So let's start with something you've probably felt. It's this gap, right? The gap between the undeniable quality of your work and the recognition that follows. Or, well, sometimes doesn't. So let's just lay out the facts of your contribution. This is really the bedrock of who you are at work. When a task comes your way, it just gets done. There are no dropped balls, no excuses. Your team, your managers, they know you're the reliable one, a steady hand. And you do it without any drama or big fanfare, This isn't just about managing your time well. It's a sign of respect. For the project, for your colleagues, for the commitments you make. It's the hallmark of a real professional. When things get complicated, you're the one who quietly figures it out. You untangle the mess, you fix what's broken, and you just keep things moving forward. This is where you create so much value, often behind the scenes. And here's the question that can be so frustrating. After all of that consistency, that dependability, all that problem solving, why is there a disconnect? I want to be really clear about this. It is not a question of your ability. The issue is something else entirely. The challenge is something we can call the translation gap. It's that space between what you do and how others perceive your impact. See, in most organizations, everyone's busy. And good work, well, it doesn't always speak for itself. It needs to be translated into the language of impact, a language that leadership really understands and values. So let's give this a name, the silent high performer. Now, this isn't a criticism, it's just a description, an archetype. It describes a professional whose value is absolutely there, but whose visibility is, well, a bit limited. And just recognizing this pattern, that's the first real step to changing it. Because this isn't a personal failing, it's a communication challenge. Okay, so once we see the problem for what it is, what do we do about it? Let's talk about the solution. And it's so important to get this. This is not about changing who you are. Not at all. It's about adding a new skill to your toolkit. It's a way to actively make sure your contributions are seen, understood, and really valued. The path forward really has 3 deliberate steps. First, we strengthen clarity. That's your ability to talk about your own value and the impact of what you do. Then, from that clarity, you start to build genuine confidence. And the natural result of having both clarity and confidence is that your professional influence just starts to grow. Look, this isn't about some huge overnight transformation. It's a gradual, intentional process of shifting your approach. It's all about making small, deliberate adjustments in how you communicate your work and its value. Because real, lasting professional growth, it happens quietly, thoughtfully, one mindset at a time.
Work should speak for itself. That's a phrase we hear all the time. Maybe it's a principle you've built your own career on. And it's a powerful idea, a deeply held belief for so many competent, dedicated professionals who just want to focus on doing excellent work.
This belief is really the hallmark of a professional identity that we could call the silent high performer. And as we explore this, I want you to consider if this feels familiar. Perhaps it describes you, or maybe a colleague you deeply respect. It's a very common identity, and for a lot of good reasons.
So what does this person look like? Well, here are some of the foundational strengths. These are often the people who form the very backbone of a team. Their reliability is just absolute. You give them a task and you just know it'll be completed, and with care. Their attention to detail, it catches those critical issues that others might miss. And that calmness you see in meetings, well, that comes from deep processing, not from a desire to grab the spotlight. They genuinely find fulfillment behind the scenes, driven simply by the quality of the work itself.
It's really vital to understand that this approach, it isn't born from a lack of confidence. Not at all. It comes from a deeply held philosophy, a perspective that's rooted in integrity. And that's why we can call it what it is, a noble belief.
You see, the core of this belief is a preference for substance over noise. It's a commitment to the idea that the genuine contribution, the insightful analysis, the well-crafted solution, that thorough preparation is what truly matters. It champions tangible results over, superficial self-promotion.
So, let's be perfectly clear. This mindset is not a weakness. It is without question a professional strength. This focus on substance is what builds trust, it's what ensures quality, and it creates real, measurable value for any organization. It is an admirable and an essential quality.
However, even the most noble beliefs can run into some practical limitations in a busy workplace. And this is where we have to introduce a quiet, often overlooked challenge, the visibility gap.
This leads us to a crucial question, one that's really worth pausing on. If your excellent work, your deep expertise, and your consistent reliability are all happening, but they are happening invisibly, does that strength ever achieve its full potential? Is a strength truly a strength if it isn't seen by the people who need to see it?
So how do we bridge this gap? Well, that brings us to our final section, turning strength into influence. Now, the goal here is not to change who you are at your core. It's about understanding the crucial link between your competence and your ability to have a broader impact.
Strength becomes influence only when it is visible. This isn't a call for grandstanding or empty promotion. It's about the simple, strategic act of ensuring that the value you create is communicated and understood. Visibility is the bridge that transforms your quiet competence into tangible influence, allowing your good work to really shape decisions and outcomes.
And so, I'd like to leave you with this thought. This isn't a challenge to become someone else. It's an invitation for a quiet, personal reflection, to simply ask yourself in a way that feels authentic to you, how visible is your strength?
You've probably heard the advice, let your work speak for itself. It's a very common idea. But I think it's fair to ask, in today's world, is that really enough? A lot of us feel this tension, don't we, between doing great work and the need for that work to be visible. So let's explore how we might find a better balance here. And there's a good reason that idea of quiet work is so appealing. Because silence, well, it can feel dignified. It suggests a sort of quiet competence, a belief that the quality of our work should be the only proof needed. It feels professional and self-assured. It almost feels like the right way to be. On the other hand, actively trying to be more visible, that can feel uncomfortable, can it? It can feel a lot like self-promotion, maybe even boasting. It pulls us out of that comfortable space of just doing the work and asks us to perform it. And for many of us, that just doesn't feel very natural at all. You see, this discomfort is often tied to a much deeper lesson. Many of us have been taught, either in our careers or just growing up, that real humility is quiet, that you don't talk about what you've accomplished, you just let other people notice on their own time. And this brings us to a really important question. Is this belief, this equation of silence with dignity, is it actually helping us grow? Or is it possible that our quiet dignity is being misinterpreted, and maybe, just maybe, it's holding us back? To really answer that, we have to make a critical distinction. It's a distinction between two ideas that often get tangled up together, the idea of humility and the state of invisibility. Let's be very clear about this. Humility is a virtue. It's really about having an accurate view of yourself, knowing your strengths, but also acknowledging your weaknesses. Invisibility, though, that's something different. It's simply a state of being unseen. It's a lack of presence, not a sign of your character. So here's the crucial point. They are not the same thing. You can be deeply humble while also being completely visible. The two are not in conflict. And believing that they are, well, that might just be the biggest barrier to our own professional growth. Okay, so with that in mind, let's build a new framework, a way of thinking that embraces both humility and visibility, using a very simple formula for growth in your career. The way forward really relies on a simple equation. You see, professional growth isn't just about your competence. That's only half of the story. Real, meaningful growth happens when you have competence plus communication. It's about having the skill and then amplifying that skill by sharing it effectively. Now, this reframes what we mean by communication. This isn't about boasting. It's about providing context for your work. It's about sharing insights that are valuable to others and clearly articulating the value of what you do. Instead of just a list of tasks you finished, frame your updates as progress toward a shared goal. Explain the why behind what you're doing. This is what makes your competence useful to everyone else. When you start to embrace both your competence and your communication, the outcome is, well, it's very practical and it's very powerful. You begin to set in motion a logical sequence of events, a clear path toward opportunity. This path starts with clarity. And from that clarity, you build credibility. And then from that credibility, opportunity naturally follows. You see how each step builds on the last? Think about it. When you communicate your work, your ideas, and your process with real clarity, you get rid of any doubt or confusion. People understand what you're doing and, just as importantly, why it matters. And that fundamental understanding, that's the foundation of trust. And that trust is what we call credibility. So once you've established that credibility, the entire dynamic changes. You're no longer just a quiet contributor in the background. You are now a known, trusted, and reliable professional. And when new projects come up, or new roles, or new challenges, credible people are the first ones who come to mind. Opportunities start to find you. So we end up back where we started, but with a completely new perspective. We've seen that intentional communication, that clarity, is what really drives opportunity, which leaves us with one final reflective question. If clarity is what builds opportunity, then what exactly is your silence building? You know, if you look closely at any professional environment, underneath all the noise of tasks and deadlines, there's something else at play. An unseen architecture, really. It's the structure that quietly guides how influence flows, how decisions are actually made, and ultimately, how careers are shaped. So today, let's take a closer look at that architecture. So where does this all happen? Well, our professional impact isn't judged in some abstract way. It's assessed in two very specific places. Let's call them arenas. These are the everyday spaces where people form their opinions about our work. The first one is pretty obvious, the meeting. This is the formal arena. It's where plans get approved, where resources are allocated, and where the official path forward gets set. What happens in these structured settings? Well, it directly steers the ship for projects, for teams, and sometimes for the whole organization. But then there's the second arena, which is just as important, if not more so, and that is the simple conversation. You know, the one-on-one chat, the quick update in the hallway, the follow-up call. These small interactions, they add up over time. They might not set the immediate direction, but they profoundly shape people's memory of you and your work. This is where your reputation is truly built. And here is the fundamental rule that governs both of these arenas. It's not just about the work we do. It's about the perceived impact of that work. That is what gets a response. Leaders act on the information that they can see and understand clearly. And the crucial thing to realize is this: perception isn't passive. It is something that is actively shaped. Okay, so if perception is what really matters, how do we go about shaping it effectively? Well, the most powerful tool we have isn't about volume or frequency. It's something much more refined. It's the principle of clarity. This is the core idea right here. Opportunity doesn't just happen by chance. It's drawn to those whose value and intent are easy to understand. Think about it. Ambiguity creates friction for decision makers. But clarity removes that friction and signals that you're reliable. And this is the direct result. When you can articulate what you did, why it mattered, and what the outcome was, you remove the burden of interpretation from others. Your value stops being a subjective debate, and it becomes an objective fact. Now, there's a common misconception about how to get this kind of visibility. The instinct for many is to simply increase the volume. Speak more, be more present, just make more noise. This is a strategic error. See, the objective isn't to become louder, it's to become clearer. Loudness is just noise. It actually overwhelms and can obscure your message. Clarity, on the other hand, is a signal. It's about precision. It's the deliberate act of refining your communication down to its essential core. It's about delivering your key point with an impact that can't be ignored. This is the shift from quantity to quality. So let's bring this all back to you. This isn't about a personality overhaul. It's about one intentional choice. In your next meeting or your next important email, what is the one idea you will focus on making undeniably clear? Because that right there, that is where the architecture of your influence truly begins. It's a common feeling, isn't it? That your hard work, it just isn't getting the recognition it deserves. For a lot of us, the idea of self-promotion feels, well, a bit uncomfortable, maybe even inauthentic. So today, let's explore a different, more effective way to think about this. Let's talk about strategic visibility. And really, this is the core of it, isn't it? How do you stay true to yourself? How do you remain authentic and still make sure your contributions are seen? It's a real challenge, and frankly, it holds a lot of talented people back. So let's look at how we can find a way through it. All right, so the solution, it really starts with a shift in perspective. Because the problem isn't some flaw in your character. It's actually a pretty common misunderstanding of what being visible really requires. And let me be clear, it has nothing to do with changing your personality. So what's this common belief? Well, it's the idea that to be more visible, you have to somehow become a different person. Adopt this loud, outgoing persona. Be the one who's always talking in every meeting. But that's just a myth. And it's a really powerful one that honestly holds a lot of good people back. The reality, though, is something else entirely. It's not about getting a new personality. It's about developing what we can call intentional expression. And let's be very clear what that means. It's not about changing who you are. It's simply about being more deliberate, more thoughtful in how you communicate your work and the value it brings. Okay, so how do we actually do this? How do we practice this intentional expression? Well, the good news is it's not some abstract theory. It's a set of practical, learnable skills. Really, they're just practices that anyone can start using no matter what your personality is like. Let's walk through 4 of them right now. So here they are, 4 really powerful practices. First, ask questions that shape thinking. This isn't just about asking any question, it's about guiding the conversation. Second, summarize outcomes after a discussion. This is so valuable because it creates clarity for everyone and naturally positions you as a leader. Third, and this is a big one, highlight results, not just your effort. We're going to dive a little deeper into that one in just a moment. And finally, number 4, always connect your work to the bigger priorities. This shows you're not just doing tasks, you're thinking strategically. So what's the goal of all these practices? Really, it's to help you deliberately shift the conversation. It's about moving the focus away from just talking about how hard you worked and onto the impact your work is actually having. That's what makes your work resonate. Okay, this is a perfect example of that shift from effort to impact. On one side, you have, I spent 30 hours building the new dashboard. That's all about the effort, right? But look at the other side. The new dashboard gives leadership real-time sales data. See the difference? That second statement focuses entirely on the result, on the value, and immediately answers that unspoken question that every leader has, so what? Why does this matter? That is the power of intentional expression. And this brings us to that last and maybe most crucial practice. You have to connect your work to what the business actually cares about. When you can frame what you're doing in the context of the organization's big priorities, things like growth or efficiency or customer happiness, then the importance of your work just becomes obvious. You're no longer just talking about a task you completed, you're showing how you contribute to the bigger picture. You're demonstrating real strategic value. So when we bring this all together, you can see what's happening. These practices, they're not about putting on an act or faking it. They're simply tools. They are ways to help your authentic value be seen and understood more clearly. It's about achieving visibility through intention, not by trying to manufacture a new personality. Which brings us right back to where we started. The simple truth is, you can remain authentic and still be visible. They are not opposites. In fact, strategic visibility and authenticity don't have to be in conflict at all. When you practice these kinds of intentional expressions, you're building a bridge between them. You're allowing your real professional value to shine through. So, I'll leave you with a question to reflect on. Of the 4 practices we talked about today, asking those shaping questions, summarizing outcomes, focusing on results, or connecting your work to priorities, just pick one. What is one intentional expression you will try to practice this week? It doesn't have to be a huge change. Remember, just one small, deliberate step is really all it takes to get started.
If you're someone who really focuses on the work, someone who believes that high-quality results ought to speak for themselves, then this is for you. We're going to talk about the silent high performers, the ones whose excellence, well, it often goes unnoticed. And it's not because the work isn't valuable. It's because it hasn't been made visible.
This situation naturally brings up a pretty fundamental question. It's one that a lot of really talented people ask themselves, quietly of course. In a world that seems to reward the loudest voice, is being quiet a professional weakness?
Let's be perfectly clear about this. The answer is no.
Being quiet is not a weakness. It can be a real source of strength, of focus, of deep thought, of careful execution. It's a trait, not some kind of flaw.
But while quietness itself isn't the problem, we do have to be honest about a challenge that often comes along with it. It's a challenge of perception, really, and it's one that can limit your professional impact.
And this is a really crucial distinction to make. See, on one hand, you have quietness. That's a personal trait. It's just a way of being. But on the other hand, you have invisibility. And that isn't a trait. It's a result. It's an outcome that puts a very real limit on your influence.
And that's the core issue we need to look at. It really doesn't matter how brilliant your work is if its full impact isn't actually seen or understood. Being invisible, well, it limits your ability to shape projects, to guide your teams, and to move your own career forward.
A lot of this tension, it comes from a mental barrier, a common misunderstanding that many silent performers have about what it really means to be seen in a professional setting.
So many of us believe that trying to be seen is just an act of ego. We kind of equate it with bragging or self-promotion or just needing praise, but that completely misinterprets its professional purpose.
So I want you to try reframing it like this. Visibility is not about ego. It is about responsibility. It's a responsibility to your work to make sure it has the maximum possible impact. It's a responsibility to your team so they can understand your contributions. And, of course, it's a responsibility to yourself for your own growth. Okay, so if we accept that visibility is a responsibility, the next question becomes, how do we actually do that? How can we embrace it authentically without feeling like we have to become someone we're not?
Well, the path forward is probably simpler than you think. This isn't about some kind of personality transplant. Step 1 is absolutely crucial. You do not need to change who you are. The real shift happens in step 2. You only need to change how you present the impact of your work. See, this isn't about being louder. It's about being clearer. It's a small but powerful internal shift from just doing the work to doing the work and making sure its value is understood. And that right there, that's the foundation of mature professional growth.
Learning how to articulate your value, how to share your insights responsibly, that's not just some tactic you learn. This is what meaningful career growth actually looks like.
In this evolution, it creates a new kind of professional identity. Let's call it the effective professional. This is someone who combines their high performance with the responsible presentation of their impact. And by doing that, they maximize their influence.
This is really the goal. It's not to become the loud performer or stay as the invisible performer. It's to become the effective professional, where your excellent work and your clear communication create a truly powerful synergy.
So, I'll just leave you with a question to think about. As you go about your work, your projects, just consider this for a moment. What impact of yours is currently silent, just waiting to be responsibly shared?